The U.S. national debt, a topic that often sparks heated debates, stands at a staggering $33 trillion as of early September 2023. Now, that's a lot of zeros, isn't it? But what does this colossal figure represent? Well, it's a mix of two main components: intragovernmental debt holdings and public-held debt. Let's dive a little deeper. Intragovernmental debt holdings may sound like a complex term, but it essentially refers to the money that the government owes to itself. Yes, you heard that right. The government is in debt to itself, to the tune of about $7 trillion. This debt is held by government trust funds, such as the Social Security Trust Fund and the Medicare Trust Fund. Now, let's move on to the second component, the public-held debt. This is the portion of the national debt owned by individuals, corporations, foreign governments, and other entities outside the U.S. federal government. As of 2023, the public-held debt stands at around $25.7 trillion. This is the debt that often gets the most attention, as it's the debt that the government owes to external entities. So, if we take a step back and look at the big picture, we're staring at a massive $33 trillion debt. It's a number that's hard to wrap our heads around. It's like trying to count the grains of sand on a beach, or the stars in the night sky, but it's a reality we have to face. And it's not just about the sheer size of the debt, it's also about the complexity. The national debt is a multifaceted issue, with diverse components and ramifications. It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle, with each piece representing a different aspect of the debt. So, we are looking at a vast national debt with diverse components. But what does this actually mean for the economy and us? To understand the implications, we first need to know what national debt represents. It's essentially an accounting record. Now, that may sound overly simplistic, but let's dig a little deeper. Imagine the national debt as a giant ledger, a financial diary, if you will. This ledger tracks the ebb and flow of money, specifically how much the government has injected into the economy, and how much it has retracted through taxation. Every time the government spends more than it collects in taxes, the national debt increases. Conversely, when tax revenues exceed spending, the national debt decreases. Now, you might be thinking, well, that sounds like a bad thing. We should aim for zero debt, right? But here's where it gets interesting. Just as a business might take on debt to invest in growth or weather a rough patch, a country can also use debt strategically. For instance, in times of emergencies such as wars or economic downturns, the government can borrow money to fund necessary expenditures. This is akin to a family taking out a loan to cover urgent medical expenses. It's not ideal, but it's necessary under the circumstances. Moreover, debt can also serve as a tool for stimulating economic growth. By spending more than it collects in taxes, the government can inject money into the economy, potentially sparking business activity and job creation. But here's the catch: just as it isn't healthy for a person or business to be saddled with excessive debt, a government too can face issues if its debt levels become unsustainable. And no, zero debt isn't the goal. In fact, having zero national debt might even be detrimental, as it could mean the government isn't investing enough in the economy or adequately preparing for potential crises. So, contrary to popular belief, zero debt isn't the goal. However, this doesn't mean all levels of debt are sustainable. It's a delicate balance that needs to be struck, and that's where the real challenge lies. There's a fine line between a healthy dose of debt and an overdose, and that's where economic concerns and sustainability come into play. The ever-expanding national debt is like a siren call that beckons economists and politicians alike, all warning of the potential harm that could ensue. Now, it's easy to regard these warnings as mere scare tactics, but the truth is, they're rooted in valid economic concerns. Consider this: a family, much like a nation, can handle a certain amount of debt. A mortgage or a car loan, for instance, is manageable if the income is steady and the interest rates are low. But if the debt keeps piling up, the interest rates skyrocket, and the income stays stagnant, that's when the red flags start waving. The same principle applies to the national debt. The sustainability of the debt, our ability to manage it without capsizing the economic boat, depends on factors like the interest rate on borrowing and the growth rate of the economy. Think of the interest rate as the price we pay for borrowing money. If it's low, it's like getting a bargain on a loan. The government can borrow more, invest in infrastructural developments, and stimulate economic growth. But if the interest rates climb, the cost of borrowing goes up, making it more difficult to service the debt and putting pressure on other areas of the economy. On the flip side, we have the growth rate of the economy. When the economy is growing robustly, tax revenues increase, making it easier to manage the debt. But if the economy falters, the opposite happens, making the debt harder to handle. So you see, it's a delicate balancing act. The national debt isn't inherently bad. Like a tool, it's all about how we use it. If we borrow to invest in things that boost economic growth, like infrastructure or education, the debt can be a boon. But if we borrow recklessly, using debt to fund immediate consumption rather than long-term investment, then we're setting ourselves up for trouble. Thus, the key is not eliminating debt, but managing it effectively and ensuring it's sustainable. But where does all this debt come from, and what is it used for? This question leads us to delve into the composition and usage of the U.S. national debt. At its core, the majority of the U.S. debt is held by the public. This might sound confusing, as we often think of debt as something owed to external entities. However, in this case, public refers to anyone from individual American citizens to domestic businesses and foreign investors, who invest in government securities like Treasury bonds. These bonds are essentially IOUs from the government, with the promise of repaying the amount borrowed with interest at a specified future date. Now let's talk about the usage of this debt. Historically, debt has been a crucial tool for handling emergencies. Think about it like your personal credit card. It's a good safety net for unforeseen circumstances, a sudden car repair, an unexpected medical bill, or a job loss. The U.S. government uses its debt similarly, for instance, to fund wars or respond to economic recessions. However, the concern arises when we shift from using debt for emergencies or long-term investments to continuous borrowing for immediate consumption. It's like using that credit card not for the unexpected car repair, but for daily Starbucks runs. Sure, it's nice to have that latte now, but it's not adding any long-term value, and you're still going to have to pay for it later, with interest. This shift in debt usage has led to a growing chorus of economists voicing their concerns. The issue is not just the fact that the U.S. has a significant amount of debt, but the nature of that debt, the fact that it is increasingly being used for immediate consumption rather than for investing in the future. As such, it's not just about how much we owe, but also where that debt is coming from and what we're using it for. The debt-to-GDP ratio serves as a vital indicator of our ability to service the debt. It's a bit like your personal credit score, but on a national scale. It tells us how much debt we have compared to the total output of our economy. Currently, this ratio is hovering around 100%, meaning our debt is roughly equivalent to the total value of goods and services produced in a year. Now, that might sound like we're teetering on the edge of a financial precipice, but it's not quite as dire as it seems. Many economists argue that a high debt-to-GDP ratio is not necessarily a problem, as long as the economy is growing at a pace that can support this debt. However, this does not mean we can ignore the potential pitfalls. The Federal Reserve has a significant influence on interest rates, and any rise in these rates can make servicing the debt more expensive. Higher interest rates mean we pay more for the same amount of debt, just like if the interest rate on your credit card went up. This can put a strain on national programs and add financial burdens. Think of it like this: if you're juggling a bunch of balls and someone keeps tossing in more, eventually you're going to drop one. The same principle applies to managing our national debt. As interest rates increase, it becomes harder for the government to juggle its obligations, and something might have to give. But here's the rub: it's not just about the numbers. It's also about the impact on everyday people. Higher interest rates can lead to cuts in public services, or increased taxes, which can hit the average Joe where it hurts: in the wallet. In conclusion, the U.S. national debt is a complex and crucial aspect of our economy. It's not about paying it down to zero, but managing it wisely for the benefit of all. So there you have it, a tour through the labyrinth of the U.S. national debt. From its towering figures to its intricate composition, the debt is more than just numbers. It's a reflection of our economy's resilience and challenges. Remember to subscribe to our channel for more insightful videos, and don't forget to like this video if it's helped you understand the U.S. national debt a little better. Until next time, keep building your wealth.